inequalities and so on. Question?
Yeah, I mean, it's just, I remember when you took me down to Newby Way and down to Grove Park, and I had absolutely no idea about the history of this, and I always wondered, why is there a Newby Way in the middle of Downham? I just couldn't, it was really strange. And then when we had the conversation and we learned all about it, it was just quite incredible. So the issues that we have now in Lewisham, like, you know, that has followed me everywhere I lived, you know. I was born in Brixton and lived in Balham and Battersea and Tooting and all those places that are gentrified, and it's followed me all the way over here to Lewisham, so it's like you just can't get away from it. But the issue around housing and young people, and particularly young black people, because there's this great exodus out to Gravesend apparently, but if they wanted to stay in Lewisham, you know, what are the kind of things that we need to think about, because there's lots of development sites going on, but where you've got the sites, they're not that huge, are they? So it's about, you know, what would make a good site for this, and what would be the things to think about for young people to maybe think about building their own home so they could stay here in the Borough.
Anybody want to go?
Well, the problem is always sites.
Right.
And the sites that, the self-build sites we had were the difficult sites that weren't being developed. There was always a reason that those sites weren't being developed. They could have been on the side of a hill, or they could have been in a floodplain like Jimbrook, or they could have been on boggy land like Newby Way. There was always a reason why they weren't developed, and they were the ones that were given for self-build. But there aren't many sites, that's the problem. There aren't many sites available.
That's one of the key things and the lessons that weren't learnt. So the new self-build scheme that is happening in Lewisham was on the worst site, which 40 other housing associations wouldn't touch.
No,
you know, and they didn't learn that lesson. We had that same thing with us. So that thing about what do you call it? Due diligence about what will work. That's one of the key things. But going back to the question about communities moving out. The Coin Street. Do people know about Coin Street? Yeah. Now, I mean, everyone now says, and I've argued with some of the local councils, they say, oh no, Coin Street's in the central London, it's great, and stuff like that. Actually, 30, 40 years ago, Coin Street was derelict. All the people were moving out. You know, nobody was investing in that south of the river, and it was only a big campaign, and Ken Livingstone's last act of the GLC granted them that derelict land. You know, and Ian, as chief executive, he would tell you what they then did. They gave this is the Oxo Tower building. Now that was owned by, I think, the Vestry family. They owned and they own half of Argentina. And then and the community groups and the communities needed land, and then the Ken Livingstone granted them, and then they gave him an eviction notice. The rescue guy, he actually flew in on a helicopter and on the roof of the building, and he was handed the eviction notice by the community group, and that was a derelict building. But from the ownership of the community ownership of the land, you see what they got now. So they've got the businesses, private businesses on the ground. They've got flats. Do you know how much a 2-bedroom flat is in the Oxo Tower overlooking the river? How much you rent a week? Who wants to guess?
£1,000, £1,200.
Say again?
£1,200.
It is £100 a week. Yeah, for a 2-bedroom flat. And in the two buildings over, those same 2-bedroom flats sell for between 2 and 4 million. Yeah, so it's about that process about the communal ownership of land, and then how you then develop it and allow the different things to happen. That's why we set up the Community Land Trust in Downham, because it's an approach which you can use upkeep of the value of the land to then subsidise lots of other things that's going on in there. And this is one of the big things about what's happened to Lewisham, what's happened to Greenwich as well, in terms of, it's great now we're getting the transport coming in, but then all of a sudden all the prices, I mean, really shoot up. One of the teachers down in Deptford was telling me when they talk about citizenship in their class, the whole discussion is about housing, because all the families look around, and even if they're on decent jobs, they cannot afford to live in Deptford. I mean, it's like 10 times their wages. So and this is a process about, and so the process, what our argument is that actually self-built for rent, and it is for rent, can offer you it should be part of the contribution to meeting housing need now, because there's so many people who are, unless you want your kids to stay with you till they're 45, 50, they need these opportunities. So that's one of our arguments. Anybody else want to add anything or?
I wanted to say that it was just an amazing project and film as well. I thought it was really inspiring. Me and Cash are from a black squatting group, and we've been squatting as a black collective for 2 years. And yeah, just learning about the conflict that you had. I'd just like you to share anything about how you navigated that as a collective, and especially without having leaders, because we kind of take an anarchist way of doing things as well. So just to share any wisdom you have on that, because it's hard.
One of my favourite subjects. Who wants to go first about group processes and anybody? Go on, come on, the people are here. Do you want to tell them?
Picking on me.
Anybody? About the group process, who was involved with the self-build? Lorraine, do you want to share anything? You said that there was a lot of headbutting going on. No?
All right. Look, for our co-op, being a lot of, I knew Beverly because of my past as a professional dancer, and this woman's starting up a dance company. So there are other people on the site I didn't know, and you don't know, once you start working with people, you just try and work out their energy and realise who you can flex with and who you don't want to flex with. But the whole community ethos, I thought it was great the way we came together, and we did that by having our meetings, by having regular meetings and sitting down and making decisions as a group and not as individuals. And I thought that was great. If there was disputes within the group, it would go back to committee, and the committee would resolve whatever the issue was, and whatever the committee said was, that was it, it was done, that was the last thing. So we learned how to grow together, we learned how to solve our problems together. But what I found really strange was that when we came near to completion, when each property came near to the end of completion, it was just like everybody went in and shut their front doors. It was like, sod you, Jack, sod you, and sod you. I'm in my place now, I'm all right, Jack. And I found that really strange, knowing that we'd spent, the project was meant to be 18 months. And phase one actually went on for about 3.5, 4 years. Am I wrong or right, Bev?
3 years, yeah.
3 years. So 18 months, and we've done 3 years on it, so budget would have been doubled and everything. So as you said earlier, if it wasn't for Martin, we would not have achieved our objective by Martin being able to juggle and work figures to get things done and materials. Yeah. Remember that when we started, all our equipment was stolen on our site. They broke in our containers and stole all the power tools, all the tool bags, everything went. So there was a different cost, and it was frustrating. But I think one of the other frustrating things was that being a cooperative, the same people who took responsibility and were able to turn up to meetings were the same people that were the most constructive on site in terms of carrying the project forwards. You had your few little lay-by people who would kind of show up and give lip service and disappear half of the day or whatever it may be. But, as I said, those of us that got into our places, because some people left before they achieved their objective, and somebody else came in and took on that half-finished project and took it to the end. So they got the benefit of it. So, I mean, overall, it was, as I said, I would do it at the drop of a hat. I'll do it again if it comes to it.
Because for me, there is a real tension here. If you want to build your house, you need determination. Yeah, and people that you see on grand designs. Yeah, most of those people are pretty nuts. But they're really focused. Yeah, and they'll go through the same process. You always say, oh, their budget's run out, but they're really determined and they're really going to go for it. And so on. Here, we need that determination of the individuals, but you're doing it as a group process. And that does lead to conflicts. There's no two ways about it. And I would say, for me, one of the key lessons has been around the fact that people have to face the consequences of their actions. And something in Charmaine, the thing that upset me was Charmaine saying that, yes, I think the rules should have been tighter, in terms of I spent 2 years, unpaid, trying to get them to do tighter rules, but you only really learn that, or sometimes people only really learn that, in the process. But we were trying to pass on our experience. So that thing about, for me, people have to face the consequences of their actions. We had people who didn't show up for 10 months. Yeah. So then when we went to expel them, then all of a sudden their family came up to fight us. And we were saying, well, if you got the energy to fight them, you care about, why don't you show up and build? But that's nature. People need housing. People are desperate for housing. You're going to find every single way people are going to try and find the thing, and you have to have a system which is strong enough, which says to those people, yes, if you do the work, you get this. If you don't do the work, I'm sorry, you don't. And I mean, for me, I take it really personally. If, I thought we had this dream and people don't show up, I'm ready to fight them. But that's not the way you do it. You have to have the system in place which says, you haven't done this, this is the consequence, and so on. And I'll tell you what was really interesting for us is because we had 3 generations of projects, with some people, I learnt towards the end of our project was not to get really angry with them and say, we're really sorry, but this is a consequence. Yeah. Some people then left the project because they weren't prepared to do the work, or they couldn't do the work. But some of them have then come back on a 3rd project and they realise that they want the house, the pressures on their family, and they become really good self-builders. Because they're, and so that thing about this thing about being a process where you're creating an individual self through community really is that. I think this is a great opportunity, but you really have to have the system in place, to make sure that those people have that. And sometimes actually saying to a person, actually, sorry, this isn't right for you right now, can be the best thing for them. But the bottom line is that we've got a contract which says we have to build 13 houses. It doesn't say you have to build your individual house. It says we have to build 13 houses. And so we had people come to us and like the woman was immediately demanding, she wanted a bathroom downstairs. She hadn't been on the project for a month. And so on. So we then decided, look, before anyone got taken on, you have to show that you're willing to do the building work and so on. All of those things. That's why sometimes the 2 years to set up the project is really good for people to learn it, because you meet everybody wants to build a house. We had 300 people. We all advertised across the whole of Lewisham. We had 300 people turn up, on our first day, and we said, great. Sign the agreement. You're on trial. Here's a month. See the trial. Of all those 300 people, and all of them wanted a house, one person turned out to be a self-builder.
Wow.
Of the 300. Yeah, people are desperate for housing, and we could do a lot better. But we have to have the system in place, to give people a chance, give them the support. So
but I think also because when I think once you're in and you've been in for 3-4 years, we've been there 30 years now, and I think one of the demoralising things is that the things that were promised per se weren't delivered. The only thing that was delivered was the self-builders completing the project. Because I don't see the self-build premium and the rate that was at and how that would eventually work. If we all chose to leave at the same time, there's no way that the self-build premium would have been working. Because it would have been an influx on Chisel's cost to give everybody the initial cost to go and put a down payment on a property, a mortgage for a property. Yeah. So that's for me. They're the things that I think if they're going to run schemes like that again today, I think that the incentives, the promises, have to be delivered so that the person who's endured the hardship, who's put in the hours and the time and the commitment, to see that project through, actually receives what they were told they were going to get, or else it's deception. Right. Yeah.
Just for you, if you're not there, I come to you. So the issue, one of the things was that our country is dominated by ownership of housing. Most people want to own. So even people who can't afford it, want to be able to own. So one of the beauty of Jose Spina's model is that while you can't own, you do get discounted rent, so 30% below what would be normal rent, but you also get a premium, which is part of the rent goes towards building up an amount. And the reason why it worked that way was that people who said like if they were on housing benefit and so on, you didn't want your housing benefit affected by the work. So we had to link the reward to the house, and that means it could only be released when you left the house. But I mean, Prince is really hitting on a deeper issue, is that the landlord itself got into financial trouble, nothing to do with the self-build, and they looked at our rents and they said our rents were too low, and so they wanted to just take away our discount. You know, and so on. And unfortunately, you know, most people don't understand all the intricacies, and it also turned out that the self-build, the tenancy agreements which we had, they just made up and just said self-build tenancy on the front cover, and none of the legally binding agreements which came from our development agreement were in there. So they thought they could then turn around and just, you know, and then remove our self-build discount. You know, fortunately, you know, some of us had kept the original agreements, and because I do this as my project work, we then challenged them on that. And then when we got the article into the papers, and then it turns out they couldn't do it. I mean, what they've done is they've backed off from doing it, but they haven't actually given us the legally binding agreements that we should have. So that's part of the process. But I would always say, you know, the lessons which I've learned is that, like, you know, people can do something, but there's always a response that we have. So if you want your rights, we earn them. We've got them legally. We have to enforce them, you know, and that's the thing, you know. So sorry, mate.
I was just going to ask about the on like a technical level, with the landlord's sort of financial position changing. How has it affected what happens with the like maintenance and the upkeep of the properties during its life cycle? Like, how does that connect with things like refurbishment or retrofit now, like 20, 30 years down the line? Whose responsibility, like, is that stuff?
So in terms of these, because what we're creating social housing. So in order to create social housing, you have to have a registered provider of social housing landlord. So we use a housing association. It was Chisel was the kind of secondary co-op, but they actually used Sluffer at the time.
Fine, okay.
Yeah, and so they actually, Sluffer developed it, but Chisel owned the properties. I guess more corporate. But anyway, so there's a housing association that owns the properties, yeah, and they've got responsibility to maintain them.
Fine.
Yeah, and so on. So that's how we pay your rent. But because, I mean, they've just been really poor managers, and there's been a lot of corruption within their system, separate from the self-build, because they've got other properties as well, you know, where the repairs guy was paying the clerk of works, taking him on holiday, and all of a sudden, you know, he was charging, you know, just loads of money was going out, excuse me. So they now, I mean, generally, if it was a well-run housing association, they would just continue with the rent. All the rents rise, but our ones always stay 30% below. The reality is that in terms of 30% below whatever the target rents are. Yeah. So, but the reality is that Chisel are themselves in trouble. Most housing associations are, you know, forming, getting, you know, much bigger organisations in order to access, you know, the market and so on. And they've been partly forced into that by the government, and that's what's happened. So Sluffer still exists, but they're now Horizon, which is a much bigger overall organisation, and so on and so forth. But for me, they're moving further and further away from being able to hear what people are, you know, what the ordinary people need, which is why it's really important. And it's a pity we couldn't include keeping there Hannah, who's a self-builder. She was saying that the new managers from Sluffer, they just don't recognise the self-builders, and the whole attitude towards people who rent seems to have changed in housing. When I went in housing, I was really proud to manage social housing and so on, but now it's kind of like, well, I was actually told, you're a tenant, you should just be grateful for what you get. You know, and these are the houses that we built, and that attitude's really changed. And I was told by one guy, you couldn't have project managed this scheme,
yeah,
you're a tenant.
Contrast your right. So upgrading your houses is a relatively specialist thing, okay?
Right?
Because of the way, you know, the style of construction. But if you compare your houses, say, with Walter's Way, which are all owned. Yeah. Okay. So most of those houses have now been upgraded, and you can see by the market value of them what they're worth. You know, and a lot of them have been done by architect owner occupiers. So they can do. So upgrading your houses is not in any way impossible. It's just a specialist activity, and in a market-driven environment like Walter's Way, it's done. And the house values, you know, are incredible.
I mean, but nobody's arguing about the houses. Everyone loves the houses. The issue is that
But they haven't been upgraded in 30 years.
Yeah,
And
that's what I
they-
mean. So
they-
if those cigar properties, like, I guess, has there been like a lot of degradation in the quality of them over time?
Yes,
and, like,
because
is that
they're
because
softwood.
the landlord's just not doing the maintenance required?
Exactly. So the properties are running down,
Yeah.
and I almost kind of believe it's a deliberate thing why the project is being run down. Why? I mean, my veranda, and we've all got a veranda in our properties. My veranda's falling down. It's literally collapsing
Yeah.
because the Douglas fir wood, the softwood that we're using, is deteriorating. Softwood only 2-3 years out there in this climate, softwood's gone, unless it's covered or treated or you're using hardwood. So the question is, why a chisel allowing the properties to be run down? Yeah, and it,
Or why didn't they have the money to
Well,
invest to upgrade?
quite clearly they've neglected the maintenance money, because I'm sure that the maintenance money was either, it's not necessarily funding that comes in, it's money that they put a portion from the rent that they collected. I could be wrong.
But no, I mean, look, the essential thing is that the issue is that Chisel itself, as an organisation, is just badly managed, and at some point they're going to get taken over because they've got mainstream properties which are in the same issue as well. But in terms of the self-build, the self-build works. People come down. I mean, you see Beverly's house, our houses. Everyone loves it. I mean, when we built them, there was the Lewisham Homes Award, and that was for both private sector and public sector housing. And they didn't know it was a self-build. They just came down, looked at the houses and said these were the best houses in the whole of Lewisham, both public and private sector, you know, and so on. They're the first houses that had cedar roofs, glass roofs, in the whole of London. You know, and so on. So we're 25 years ahead, and now all of a sudden the housing associations are going around charging the local authority for, like, you know, creating some, you know, was it rainwater system to reserve the rainwater when we've got it on our roofs and we've had it for 25 years. Sorry, there was a guy. Yeah.
Thank you very much. You spoke about Ubuntu some time ago, and I am aware of a particular system in West Africa, especially among the Yoruba-speaking West Africans. It's called Aro. Aro means it's a communal effort where you go to the farm of one person, community members will help that person, and from there you move to another person's farm, you help there, on and on and on. At the end of the day, everything is well done with very little. The only thing you provide for them is probably food, drink, and that's all. Now, I want to know this. The bond within the community, within all the participants, has it translated into some other projects apart from just building?
Right. And so did you hear that? So the process of the community self-build, has it transferred into other projects? Anybody?
You answer.
Anybody want to answer? I mean, in terms of us, what happened was one of the things which we didn't really touch on in there was that we had arson attacks. We had arson attacks on ourselves, which were racist arson attacks, but we also had by the woods where we lived, there were 150 fires in one summer, and most of them weren't targeted at us. They were just like the woods was neglected. People dumped sofas in there, nappies, and went on fire. So one of the things that I committed to with our neighbours was once we built our houses, because some of our neighbours came and helped us with the frame lift that you saw, we would then do up the woods. So we then got £50,000. And we worked with all the local schools and the local kids design mosaics, and the woods cleared up, and that group is still going now. And then that's what's led on to the community land trust, because we now work with the GPs in the area and so on. And we're looking to we've got about 360 acres that we're looking, or green space that we're looking to develop timber frame buildings in that. So yeah, so it's led to more stuff.
And also, but I was going to say, phase 2, I mean, on phase 1, it was, phase 2 came out the concept of phase 1, so that before we finished, was it that the land came available, Beverly?
Yeah.
And we opted that we'll go and create a second phase, which is why Nubian Way came about. Yeah. So, and the idea is that we wanted to keep building, because the idea is that if you started out with a small amount of properties, we was hoping that we'd go on to become a housing association. First black run housing, but I think, you know, what happens again, it's just like once your properties got finished, how everybody felt, because it was hard graft and it was touch and go at times. So I think after phase 2, it was like, yeah, just live. I wanted to create my garden and around my house and make my house, you know, as green as possible.
Right.
But then
And-
you did the same thing on phase.
But we did, so we asked them, we went on to the 3rd one and so on, and hopefully we're doing more. Tam who, yeah?
Hi, I'm interested. Really great film, by the way, and amazing contributions just now. I'm interested in like organisational structure and like holding people to account. Like, you know, like your housing association, the support that you got from your council, and then also I had a question about like whether you knew, harking back to Barbara's question. Is it Barbara? So, yeah. About kind of like the housing need and like like how many sort of self-built homes do you think you could identify? But that was just kind of an overview. So just to kind of break it down, your co-op, does it function like a TRA or like a tenants and residents association where you guys meet and where you do things like, for example, call in your housing association representatives,
Right.
and like, you know, put them on the grill and say, you know, this is what was promised, or this neglect is what's happening, because we see a lot. I'm a councillor in Evelyn. We see a lot that TRAs organise. We've got really active TRAs in our area who are doing things like holding meetings, calling the local MP, calling us to come, calling the housing associations, and because we're all CC'd in, they can't escape. And it's like, you know, you've got service charges, because it's not just Chisel is your landlord, but across the board, and especially Deptford, you've got Lewisham Homes, you've got other housing associations that are just letting damp and mold epidemics and, you know, such forth. Like, it's a real disgrace. Like, so I mean, I'm interested in how you guys organise to hold your housing association to account, like the support that you're getting or maybe not getting from your the council and other kind of stakeholders. I'm really interested in the sort of what you're doing with doctors and surgeries as well.
So in terms of...
But I'll stop there because
She's our fiery local councillor down in Deptford who really believes in community, and it's great that you came. You know, we appreciate it. We, in terms of our co-op, we were a building co-op, so we set up as a co-op because we had to have a legal entity to access the money, and that legal entity was the co-op, and we were there to do the building. I think it's fair enough to say when people haven't built their houses, people didn't want to get into the management and collecting rents of, you know, of their neighbours, and so that's what the housing association was doing. What we found out, I know on Newbury Way, what we found out was that, like, you know, the housing associations just went off and, you know, they just did their own thing, and so like a tenants association wasn't really having an impact, particularly when they were going to get rid of our self-build discount, and the only way you could have an influence on was as to be a member of Chisel. We collected everybody's you know, membership and went to be members of Chisel, and then they just suspended membership while they were attempting to remove our self-build discount, and then we had to we got our MP and went to the housing minister and so on. And I have to say that the leader of leader of housing committee, Paul Bell, was really supportive at the time, but he said he's never met a housing organisation that just, you know, like where Chisel were at the time, you know, and not much has moved on. In fact, they've just expelled one of the founding co-ops of Chisel because they went to the regulator, you know, and so on. So there's and Sophie Davis is aware of it, and the local MPs, you know. So yeah. Were there any more? Sorry, Bob.
So what is the role of the housing association in all of this? Because Chisel is a type of organisation, but the housing association, you said, was Horizon?
Sorry, it was Sluffer Horizon. The other, my thing is that they're the gatekeepers in terms of they've got money, yeah. But part of the reason for this is that what is it that you guys want? If you know people who want to build, you know, the bottom line is that it comes about by people putting pressure, you know, and by raising these issues. You know, we can support you in terms of doing that, but it really is, you know, do people want to do this? You know, and so on. There's a community led housing organisation in our area, you know, and they came along and they saw our self-build, and their response was, oh, we want to take over those houses, and the rents are too low, and your rents are going to go up, you know. They didn't go and talk to any of their tenants and ask them what they needed for the area, and so that's why we set up the Community Land Trust, and we're working with all the other people and the doctors to actually say to them, look, people in the area, they need lower rent. You know, we've got loads of young people who want jobs. This is a potential to do that, you know, and so on. And that's a challenge, you know, which they don't particularly like. But, you know, so the point is that if people are hungry enough, you know, then we can put the pressure on them. But you've got to have the voice of all the people saying it, you know, is the key thing. And trust us, if there's anybody here who wants to set up a group and you want to support, you know, we'll give you the support that you need to do that. You know, and there is you know help out there to make it work. I'm not sure what the time is, so sorry, go.
8:30, 25.
Do you think it's is it any easier 30 years on than it was?
What, to get up my stairs?
Self-builders wouldn't want to do it again now because, you know, time's moved on and everything's a bit harder. But I wanted to know, would you, if you were the same age now as you were then, would you be up for doing another one?
Can we go through, Andrew? Would you do it again?
London Circuit has a black organisation and it being run better. I would do it again, but obviously time's moved on, but I would have done it again.
Right. And what about you, Lorraine?
Yeah, it was a good experience. It was a good experience.
Yeah, you do it again. Would you get Elliot to do one when you want him at the house? Okay. Who else? Bev?
Would I do it again? I think the challenges would be very different now. What I have taken away though, I think this whole thing about policies and processes, just to make sure that those things are in place as early as possible, and part of that contract should be whoever's self-building adheres to those, so that there's a kind of conversation about commitment before you even start. I think as well that, I mean, one of the things that we were able to do was to do very basic training in terms of, you know, how you how you did your plumbing or how you did a bit of carpentry, so that there was a basic understanding of those sorts of issues. I think Prince is absolutely right, and you alluded to it as well, in that once people got through their front doors, everything kind of stopped, because essentially these are people who just wanted to have nice accommodation. And so if there's not a belief in the concept of what you're trying to build, then that just becomes really difficult, because ultimately once all the work is done, you just want a nice cozy house to be in. And I just think that those things have to be built in.
But I mean, just in response to that, I'll come back. Just in response to that, I mean, I would say that on our street, there's only, I think, 4 or 5 original self-builders left. But everybody who's come in absolutely loves it. Not just from the design of the fact, but from the fact that they know that their neighbours come out and talk to them. You know, people who hate me we have a shared history. So when there's problems, they still, you know, they know they come and ask for help, and people know that, and their kids also know it, you know. So they do say that they actually love living there, because it's much more, you know, of a community than anywhere else that they've known.
But I think the thing as well is that from those early processes as well, it's kind of just like building on people's strength, because, you know, people come to that place with all sorts of different skills, and what you might find is that you have somebody that's particularly good at electrics, or somebody who's good at plumbing or whatever. Just to be able to kind of build on those strengths, so there's a real sense of what it is they're bringing to that community as well. So then when you start talking about issues around how you're able to kind of maintain those properties, then you have in-house, if you like, kind of support to develop that. But that again, that's something else we really needed to kind of invest in.
Prince,
I agree.
what
I agree with Beverly totally.
Right.
But ultimately, of course, I've built again. I mean, when you're homeless, you don't have nowhere to live, or you're on someone's sofa, or on someone's whatever it is. Of course, you know, you want the security of having the walls and the roof over your head, especially if you've got children. So, you know, to build again, most definitely. The challenges that we endured, as Beverly said, make sure all the policies are in place and all the agreements are in place that everybody abides by. But I mean, for me, one of the greatest things was the learning curve, because you'd go in not having any skills of doing first fix plumbing, first fix electrics, to do your own floorboards. Yeah. So the learning curve was tremendous. If you didn't know nothing, by the time you left the project, there were loads of things that you felt empowered to go and do for yourself. Yeah, because it's true though, Bev. It is.
Yeah, I think sometimes you can forget how far I mean, one of the things I love about Charmaine was her saying, because for her it was a really big thing, and then she went on run her own business and employed 10 of their own, you know, of the people from the start and so on. And then her son, who was, you know, there were 4 of them in a 2-bed flat. He's now, you know, I think he's a millionaire now, you know, and he also,
we made mistakes somewhere along the line.
And stuff like that, you know. Sorry, Joe.
No, I was just wondering whether the difficulties you've had since you've been in and with the housing association, do you think that's a missing link that you would really strongly advise anybody launching on an adventure like this, that they build in an appetite or a plan to have their own housing association so that they don't get exploited?
I would to become a housing association is such a ridiculous administrative thing. I mean, it really is. I wouldn't tell anyone to become a housing association. I mean, it's just so much grief. All I would say is that with the same thing which we're doing with all our community projects is do diligence. There are good people out there. I mean, I mentioned before, I mean, Martin's a proper qualified architect and does construction, so you've got to find your people. We had a guy who couldn't make it today, Ian Taylor, a QS, who, you know, has the same values, professionals. A guy we don't mention that much, and he gets around, a guy called Phil Morris. He was a finance guy for all of our self-builds. He was also a finance guy for Coin Street. You know, so you've got people, professionals, who share similar values. So it's about finding the partnership. And I would just say that takes time and build that in. But also, in terms of most projects now, I think most people don't want to get involved in the groundworks. It's too much work and stuff like that. But, you know, you can plan the rest of the stuff. You know, and most people, I mean, on Chibble Meadows, which is seen as the most successful scheme in terms of how quickly it got built, and it was under budget and on time in terms of the build. That was because we trained them, but also they did mainly the construction work. They didn't get into, I mean, the groundworks were too technical because it was the floodplain stuff, but they didn't want to get into that, and because it was really well organised, and, you know, they got the benefit of our hard lessons. It went really quickly, and I say that most self-builds want to do that now. They don't want to, you know.
We started with the hours on Jimbrook,
right,
and worked out what they could do with those hours, and that's how the budget was worked. Whereas the other schemes weren't done that way.
But it's also realistically about what's involved.
Yeah.
You know, so like when I'm having discussions with Lewisham now, we talk to the fact that Lewisham College have got all these trainees who can't get jobs because they need to build up their speed. So we then employed a site supervisor for those particular trainees, and they built up their speed. We had one guy who he ended up getting a £50,000 a year job on the extension of the Jubilee line 25 years ago. You know, it was his first job, but it's because he built up the speed, you know, which he wouldn't necessarily be able to do that. And so on. And then there's a really good college which escapes me that does lots of carpentry, groundworks and stuff like that. And they're Capel Manor. You know, there's a whole supply of people there, and it's about building all of that in before you get anywhere near on site. I talk a lot.
No, Tim.
Tim, you're running over.
Yeah, I'm running over, and everyone needs to go home. So, she's only Is there anything people want to say or want to do, or is there any other issue that people, or any other comments you wanted to? Hi, sorry, Barbara. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I just, when I first heard about this, is that before lockdown, I was just totally amazed. And, since that time, I met somebody who lived in Leighton who wanted to get on the property ladder. And they came to look at the apartments that were built behind Lewisham Station on that road that takes you down Brookmill Road. And it's meant to be affordable, but it was meant to be for Lewisham people, but they were considering people outside of Lewisham because people in Lewisham couldn't afford them. So, and you just think that's absolutely crazy. And we do have a very young population here. And, being able to have generations in one place is one way of making a community stable, but also helping, younger people to grow. So it's just about what is the learning that can be taken from this? Because I'm just thinking, they've done Lewisham now, I guess. The Section 106 or community infrastructure levies there. You've got the plans for Catford. There's this whole big thing around social value. And it's just about how is it that all of these things that are there can be used to enable people either to build here or somewhere else. Because for young people, housing, HMOs is the thing now, isn't it? And it's gone back to, my parents came in 1950s and they lived in those conditions, and obviously they're a bit...
Do you know what you mean by the HMOs?
Oh, housing with multiple occupations. So it's gone back to that one room and everything. And you're kind of thinking, well, it's how can we give people a better start, particularly if you want to have a family. So what is the learning that we could take from that in Lewisham to think about, what the opportunities might be?
Well, I think I know the answer, but I mean, we ain't got time now. But what I would say is that thanks to the support of Ben and Will, all of this, the film's going to be online, and then there'll be an ongoing forum. And also, what you're going to see is that it depends on, I'm not sure if I won't put under pressure, but there's a few scans of some people's houses, and you're going to be able to go into see people's houses and so on, and that will be linked to the films and there's questions. So, I mean, please, we are Lewisham in
so the project is called In Living Memory. So there's a digital archive as part of that. All the content that Tim's created from his project is going to be on there, and the other 5 projects as well. Beverly's running on the project, so it's kind of doubling there. But the digital spaces, what Tim mentioned. So we've done some VR photography on Tim's house, and those are going to become kind of virtual museum spaces, which will hopefully be launched before Christmas. But
cool.
We'll see. So definitely in the new year, you're going to be able to see that. And just to thank you very much for coming down, but we really are serious about more self-build in the future. So you can get in touch with us via the IM website. Please take the leaflets and tell everybody, and have a good Christmas, and hopefully we'll see you in the new year.